This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about something quieter, something slower, something that only becomes visible after it's already moving. For a long time, we were told stability looks like continuity. Same systems, same institutions, same assumptions, just louder numbers. But systems don't fail loudly at first. They stretch, they compensate, they borrow time. And then, without announcing it, they begin to reach outward. Not because they're strong, but because something underneath is weakening. If you've felt that prices don't behave the way they used to, that if you've noticed that power is exercised differently now, more urgent, more physical, less patient, that's not coincidence. That's a phase. Stay with me. Because once you see where this phase always leads, you stop asking what just happened, and you start asking what happens next. And that question matters more than ever. For a long time, we've been trained to look for villains, faces, speeches, elections. But systems don't answer to faces. They answer to incentives. Right now, the system that governs everything you touch, prices, wages, housing, energy, is no longer driven by productivity. It's driven by maintenance, not growth, not expansion. Maintenance, keeping obligations alive, keeping promises already made, keeping confidence from collapsing under its own weight. That changes how power behaves. Decisions stop being strategic. They become urgent. Short-term, extractive. When a system reaches this point, it stops asking, how do we create value? It starts asking, where can we still get it? That question doesn't stay theoretical. It doesn't stay financial. Eventually, it becomes physical. And when that shift happens, you can feel it before you can name it. The pressure increases, the moves get faster, the justifications get simpler. And we're not at the consequences yet. We're still in the setup, because before systems break, they always try one last thing. Here's the part most people miss. Nothing snapped. Nothing collapsed overnight. What changed slowly. There was a time when power was constrained by limits. Budgets mattered. Trade-offs were visible. Choices had weight. Then those limits softened. Quietly, deficits became normal. Emergency measures became permanent. Exceptional tools became standard procedure. Before, stability came from balance. Now, it comes from momentum. As long as things keep moving, we tell ourselves they're fine, but slow change is the most dangerous kind because it trains you to adapt instead of question. You adjust to higher prices, you normalize volatility, you accept explanations that would have sounded extreme 10 years ago. And while you're adjusting, the system is recalibrating around something new. Not sustainability, not resilience, speed. Speed to respond, speed to acquire, speed to prevent hesitation from turning into doubt. By the time the shift becomes obvious, it's already been locked in. And that's why the next moment matters. Because what looks like a sudden shock is usually the system revealing what it became long ago. Then something happens that feels abrupt, not chaotic, not random, targeted. It arrives in the form of action, decisive, operational, executed while most people are asleep. Officially, it's framed as necessity, stability, security, restoring order. But look closer, and the timing doesn't line up with the explanation. The urgency feels out of proportion. The scale feels excessive. Because this isn't about solving a problem. It's about relieving pressure. When systems reach this stage, they don't innovate their way forward. They seize their way forward. They look for something tangible, something heavy, something that can be counted, controlled, extracted. And when they find it, the move is fast. What you're seeing isn't strength. It's compression. Pressure applied inward for years finally pushes outward. This moment isn't the story. It's the signal. Because whenever this happens, it means something else has already failed quietly. And once that door opens, it doesn't close gently. To understand what's happening, you have to stop looking at intent and start looking at flow. Money, resources, obligations. When a system accumulates promises faster than it creates value, it has only a few options left. It can slow down, it can admit limits, or it can redirect the damage. Most systems choose the third. The mechanism is simple. Those closest to the source of money are insulated. Those furthest away absorb the shock. Costs are socialized, assets are centralized. Inflation does the work quietly. Debt stretches the timeline. Complexity hides accountability. And when even that isn't enough, the system reaches for things that don't inflate. Land, energy, materials that exist, whether confidence does or not. This is how imbalance is managed. Not fixed, managed. And management has a direction: upward, inward, toward control, which means the damage doesn't disappear. It just moves. And it always moves toward the people who don't have a switch to turn it off. That's why the next phase isn't abstract. It's personal. Then the system starts to misfire. Small things first. Signals you're told not to overreact to. Markets swing harder. Policies reverse faster. Statements contradict themselves within days. Emergency language becomes routine. Temporary measures get extensions. Deadlines blur. This is what acceleration looks like. Decisions are no longer made to optimize outcomes. They're made to avoid immediate failure. Stability becomes a moving target. Confidence becomes fragile. And fragility changes behavior. Money moves faster, so does power. Institutions that once acted slowly begin to move all at once. And when that happens, mistakes compound. Because speed doesn't allow for correction, only momentum. This is the phase where pressure stops building and starts releasing in bursts. Not enough to break everything, just enough to make the next burst inevitable. And here's the part that matters. When systems reach this tempo, they don't slow themselves down. They wait for something else to force it. This is where it reaches you. Not as a headline, not as a chart. As friction. Things take longer, cost more, feel heavier than they used to. You start making adjustments without naming them. Smaller margins, less certainty, more contingency. You're told this is temporary, transitional, the price of stability, but stability isn't what it feels like. It feels like constant vigilance, like the ground is solid, but only if you don't move too fast. And the strange part is this: nothing is officially wrong. The system is still running. Institutions still function. Payments still clear, which makes the pressure harder to explain and easier to ignore until you realize the burden is shifting quietly, systematically, from abstraction to experience, from policy to household, from balance sheets to decisions you didn't plan to make. This is the point where people start asking different questions. Not what is happening, but how long can this hold? And that question doesn't stay personal for long. At first, it looks like noise overseas. Currency shifts, trade adjustments, diplomatic language that suddenly sounds careful. Then the pattern sharpens. Agreements are rewritten, settlements rerouted, assets repositioned without announcements. Nothing dramatic, nothing that triggers alarms, just a quiet recalibration. When systems feel pressure at the center, the edges respond first. Capital looks for neutrality. Governments look for insulation. Supply chains look for redundancy. What used to flow automatically now requires negotiation. What used to be assumed now needs guarantees. And the more this spreads, the harder it becomes to reverse. Because trust, once diversified, rarely re-centralizes. This is how local strain becomes global friction, not through collapse, through caution. Each move makes sense on its own. Together, they change the system. And once enough actors start planning for a different future, that future stops being hypothetical. Which brings us to what happens next. Because from here, there isn't one outcome. There are several, and none of them are neutral. From this point forward, the system doesn't drift. It chooses, or is forced to. There are three paths, history shows us. The first looks like adjustment, managed pressure, controlled sacrifice, standards lowered slowly enough to feel survivable. Nothing breaks at once. But nothing truly recovers either. The second is erosion. Confidence thins. Participation becomes conditional. People stay inside the system, but stop trusting it. Everything works. Just worse. More brittle, more unequal. And then there's rupture. Not collapse in the cinematic sense. A snap in expectations. A moment when the assumptions holding everything together no longer synchronize. Markets freeze. Policy lags. Faith moves faster than control. History doesn't tell us which path is chosen. Only that delay makes the sharper ones more likely. And here's the detail that matters. The choice isn't made in public. It's made through reactions, through thresholds crossed quietly. By the time it's named, it's already happened. Which means the final question isn't what will they do? It's what will you notice first? There's a temptation at moments like this to wait for clarity. For an announcement, a correction, a return to something familiar. History is unkind to that instinct. Systems don't reset with instructions. They shift while attention is elsewhere. By the time certainty arrives, it's usually too late to act on it. What we've been talking about isn't a prediction. It's a pattern, one that doesn't require belief to function. You don't need to panic, but you do need to stay alert because the signs won't come labeled. They'll arrive disguised as normal adjustments, reasonable responses, temporary measures. If you stop watching, this will still continue. If you stop asking questions, decisions will still be made. The only real advantage in moments like this is awareness before consensus. So stay with this story, not because it's dramatic, but because it's unfinished. In the next chapter, we'll look at the specific signals that tell you when pressure turns into force. You don't want to notice those in hindsight. If this helped you see the system differently, follow along. Because once this phase passes, there's no rewind.